Welcome back to the monthly edition of the PigX podcast. I'm your host, Delaney Howell. Data is one of the most talked about topics in agriculture today, and the swine industry is certainly no exception. In this episode, we're joined by Dr. Edison Magalhães, an assistant professor at Iowa State University whose work focuses on swine research and extension. A big part of that work involves collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data to help swine producers make better decisions. In today's conversation, we hear how data is impacting decision-making at the farm level, how the industry has evolved in its use of data over time, and where the next opportunities for growth may be. With more information available than ever before, producers have access to a wealth of insights. But what does it mean in practice? And how can different data sources be connected to improve sow management and overall farm performance? Let's start by hearing what sparked Edison's interest in data.
Working as a vet in the field back on my days as a swine veterinary practitioner, one common thing that we find is we can identify trends or groups that are having issues with mortality, lower average gain, feed conversion. And we kind of have an idea of what is causing that, what are the factors that are impacting the performance of the pigs. But whenever we want to pull some data and understand what's happening there, it's really hard. So I remember when I was doing that back in the field, it's either your clinical, let's say, evaluation, and you see what's going on, and then you can use diagnostics, send tissues for diagnosis just to confirm or to see if there's any other different pathogens that could be impacting the disease or in that group. But basically looking at retrospective data and understanding trends, most of the times it was very complex for me when I tried to do that, because there were so many things that we are not, let's say, accounting for in that type of analysis, that it was almost impossible to actually make any or draw any conclusions from the data itself. So basically, when I had the opportunity to do a master's and PhD here at Iowa State University, focus on epidemiology. So I'm a veterinarian, so that's my bias. I like swine health, especially the population medicine, but with a target focus on data, looking at data. I was, let's say, very interested on that. So that's why I decided to pursue that career and work more on and learn a little bit more on the data science and try to apply that with the vet background. And I think it's great. Today looking back, when I made that decision, really appreciate my advisor at that time, Dr. Daniel Linhares, for providing the opportunity to do that. I think that's an area that it's only going to grow, and not only for veterinarians, but also for data animal scientists, people working in reproduction, genetics, nutrition. We need more of those, let's say, folks out there working in the industry, people that will have enough data science expertise to, let's say, another tool in their toolbox. You know what I mean?
That is really great background, and is a nice segue into talking more about why it's important to rethink how we're using data in the swine industry, because we have a lot of data at our fingertips, but sifting through that data can feel like a really tedious and maybe overwhelming task. Why do you think now is the right moment to start having that conversation about how we're using data in the swine industry? What is changing from your perspective?
Yeah, one common thing that you just mentioned is we have a lot of data. So I think now it's a good time for that. In the past, we wouldn't have, let's say, standardized ways to collect the data. And today that's a little bit different. So most of the systems, the companies, small, medium, or large size producers in the swine industry, for some specific, let's say, data streams, that's pretty well standardized in their system and sometimes across companies. So for example, you look at the production data from sow farm, you look at the closeout data from growing pigs, basically, of course, there will be a difference between software that people are using, but the way that they are reporting the information that's well standardized and easy to understand. And we have a lot of that information available, which is key here. So we have a lot of data. Data is structured. It's in a way that is, let's say, well structured. So that's a good thing. And also, we are in a good moment where data science is a hot topic, right? We talk about AI, about programming. All these things makes are really a hot topic now, and makes sense to learn about those things and apply to the data that we have from the industry. And why we want to do that, there are many reasons. When you talk about, for example, labor pressure, that's a common problem across the industry. So if there are better ways to take advantage of the data using data science, AI technologies, and that will be an approach that won't require more labor, but in this case will be a person or models, that person that it's able to work with those models, that makes total sense, right? And the challenge that we have today in the industry, year over year, they are more complex. So in terms of disease dynamics, it's really complex. The respiratory or reproductive diseases, it's really hard to understand that. So that makes total sense. If you think about, we have a lot of data available. Data now, it's structured in a way that we can analyze. We have labor pressure, so we need solutions that are not going to require more labor, but more technology or data science. And our problems are becoming even more and more complex over time. Our margins are also tighter. So and we there's also the need for faster decisions, right? So putting that all together, that makes total sense to now it's a good time to use the data that is sitting out there in pretty much small, medium, and large farm producers. It's sitting out there, not being used in a holistic way.
As we think about how data has evolved over the years, and maybe in your time of focusing on it, what kind of shifts have we seen? What kind of trends have we seen? And later on, I hope to talk about where it's headed in the future, but just looking back in the rearview mirror for now.
Yeah, in the rearview mirror now, I think we will evolve from the paper records, let's say like that, right? Handwritten records to have all of that into softwares. And now the next big step is that it's happening. It's also the integration of the data. But that was the major one. And I think today, like I mentioned, if you go to across small, medium, or large size producers, the data is available in a way. Most of these farms is digital data and standardized. There are some components of data that are still being collected, let's say, without a specific standard. So, for example, disease management or medication management, how people are using medication or treating diseases. Each company would have a way to record how they do that, right? So that's kind of something that it's not well structured like production data. But that evolution happened in the whole industry. So pretty much everyone would have these digitalized, let's say, databases in their systems. And that's a really good advantage for us, right? That simplify things. You just do a data pull of an Excel file, for example, of 1, 2, 3, 4 years of retrospective data, and you would have a good picture of that information instead of having to deal with papers.
Where do you think we are at as far as adopting technology and data on farms? What's the biggest barrier that's keeping farmers from using this data, or swine producers?
Yeah, I think one of the major barriers today, it's the isolation, or how we used to say here in our lab, we call data silos. So even though the data is being collected in a structured way or standardized way, these production data, for example, are not connecting or communicating with the diagnostic information that goes to a veterinary diagnostic lab. And also the nutritional information might be in another place. And that's a common problem, not only, again, in small, medium, and large producers. It's across the industry. So that information, the data silos, that's a common scenario, and that's a barrier when you want to analyze the information. Because to really take full advantage of the power of, let's say, data science applied to your data, you need to have a holistic view of what's happening. So in that sense, you need to be able to understand what's impacting performance from birth to market. So that means connecting sow farm to nursery to finisher to the slaughterhouse, accounting for the very different flows of production that may occur within a company or within farms sometimes, right? So you would have one or multiple sources filling up a barn, and changes of infrastructure, changes of season, changes of disease dynamics over time within a company. So there's the biggest barrier is that, because we need to have this holistic approach to understand from birth to market what's happening in our system, not only in one area, but all areas. So production, health, infrastructure, management, nutrition, seasonality. So that's where most of the companies today, I would say, are still facing this challenge that the data is not available in a way that it's integrated.
So my guess is, or my assumption would be that the Prosper platform came from some of those challenges that you saw in the swine industry. Tell me a little bit more about how that platform came to be and what it does.
Yeah, that all started with a project where the company had a question on what's the impact of PRRS. At that time, we were using the RFLP nomenclature for different types of PRRS. And they were questioning, okay, what's the impact of these PRRS 144 or 174? How bad it is compared to the other lineage or to the other RFLPs that we had at that time. And by investigating that question, the next logical step was, okay, we can do that, but we know there are many other confounding factors that impact that question specifically. So different types of diet, the different difference in weaning age across the batches that you are analyzing. If you're looking at, let's say, I want to compare, 500 groups, lots with PRRS 174 versus others. So you need to account for many different factors. So that's where Prosper comes. We focus on applying that. First is making sure that those data silos are now connected to each other in a way that it makes sense, right? Because each silo will store the information in a specific format, might be individual pig or monthly information or closeout level or weekly. So we combine everything into one, and that way you are now better positioned to analyze that information and answer those questions. So Prosper stands for this approach, is a project that stands for Predictors of Swine Performance, where basically we focus on integrating those data silos and being able to analyze the data holistically. And when we did that the first time, we did all manually on Excel, using codes on Excel, and it worked, but it took me a couple of months to figure out how to do that, because as a vet, I didn't have any training on Excel at that moment. And it worked, but then the company came and said, okay, now I want to do the same analysis, but for the previous 6 months. And I said, okay, I'm screwed, because it's going to take a lot of time. So that's why we implemented automation on Prosper as well. So Prosper today will work on doing that process of integrating siloed data streams into one holistic master table, what we call automatically. So we build algorithms using programming software to automate this process. So now you can analyze the data on a daily or weekly basis, depending on how frequent you want. So that's kind of in a nutshell how Prosper works. So that needs to be how we are doing today. It's basically establishing system specific partnerships, and then we develop that customized, let's say, algorithm that will do the integration of data and later analyze the information. Of course, we have been focusing on health because of our uh, veterinarian bias, but that could be applied to nutrition, to many other factor areas.
Edison, I want to go back to something that you presented at Iowa Swine Day last year. You shared data showing that certain pre-weaning factors were linked to nursery mortality. Was the Prosper tool what helped you identify the relationship in that data?
That was initially the first, let's say, big analysis that we did and big finding that we had at that time, because the system they wanted to understand the major drivers of nursery mortality, what was impacting their nursery mortality. And by pulling together data from thousands of nursery closeouts across 2 years, 3 years of data, and capturing that, let's say, production, health, and infrastructure data from birth to market from those groups, when we build a model, we saw that the most significant factors for that company were actually related from the sow farm. And we know that the quality of the pigs or how good the pigs are being produced in the sow farm, that really defines how well or how they're going to succeed throughout the growing phase. But we didn't have a way to measure that. So for that analysis specific, we saw that pretty much 68% of the nursery mortality was being explained by sow farm related factors. So basically, taking advantage of that master table once it's integrated to help you understand your system. So that helped them to say, okay, if you really want to focus on nursery mortality and reduce that, in this case, really want to focus on your sow farm first. And we did the same analysis for other systems, and that varies, right? So there are systems that are, for example, in a region that there's not a lot of challenge with PRRS, PD, they have Michael-free herds, naive herds for Michael. That also facilitate things. And of course, the dependency of, for example, the growing phase on the previous performance in the sow farm is lower. So depends. That's why we say it's a system-specific approach.
And then you also use the Prosper tool to build a wean quality score, right?
Yeah, that was more once we start identifying that first you do this automation and then you do this holistic analysis, and then you can start understanding what's driving performance. Then we said, okay, the next step is, can we actually use more advanced models for the veterinary side of things? Can we use models that are more advanced and applying in other areas that we are not exploring a lot here in the vet world? And on that, we use machine learning models to create a quality score at weaning. So we call it a wean quality score. So basically, the machine learning model, it's a model that will look at your retrospective data and will test for different interactions, all different interactions that are possible. Well, basically, we'll use a database to train that machine, and that's why we call machine learning. And the machine will learn from retrospective data and will try to do predictions based on what that model is learning. That machine learning model is learning from the data. And that wean quality score was that. So we use these different machine learning models to disclose out data from nursery groups with all the birth to market information, but we wanted to see only for variables that are available up to the weaning event if we are able to establish a score of the quality of the pigs. So the model will basically learn from retrospective data, and now we will assign a score from 0 to 10, where 0 is a bad quality and 10 is a top quality group. And for each batch, then the model will say, okay, this batch of pigs going to the nursery is a score 10. And that means in the background, what we analyze is those groups that are scored as 10, for example, they usually have a higher weaning age. They don't have a high pre-weaning mortality. There are not a lot of gilts litters composing that group. They are not PRRS or MIC or PED epidemic. They are controlled for those diseases. And the opposite is the low score. And then using that score, we were able to have pretty much 88% of accuracy on predicting the downstream performance of the pigs as high or low mortality groups. So using that score to say, okay, this score you are able to predict at weaning what's going to be, if the mortality is going to be high or low in the nursery phase with 88% accuracy.
I think those are some really good real world examples of how the data has led you to some different conclusions and takeaways. But in your deck, I was looking back at it and you posed this question, can we do better? And then you have the F1 example. But what is the F1 example?
Yeah, the F1 example is it's my bias because I watch Formula One, and to my point, I think in my point of view, that's the best, let's say, example we have out there today in terms of sports for making real-time decisions based on data, and of course decisions based on the gut of the driver, right? So basically, the driver to win the race, he needs to be really good. But if he doesn't have a really good race engineer, which usually is a person that is sitting in front of many computers and dashboards where they are talking real time with the driver, he's not gonna be that driver. If that it won't be positioned to win the race without a good race engineer. And that's how I see the Formula One. So in the future, we're gonna have a producer that, okay, we'll be driving the farm, or the farm manager will be, let's say, really doing the day-to-day management procedures there in the farm, but there will be the communication in real time with someone that will have access to all the data, let's say, in a way that it's holistically, right? So we'll be looking at the performance, the health, the season, all those things together, and telling the producers, hey, you should breed these sows later or sooner, or you should apply this vaccination protocol in this group because the mortality is going to be higher. There's a high risk. So that's something that I envision for the future. I don't think we are ready yet for that. I think we'll take a couple of years to get to that point, but it's not lack of technology, because there are other examples out there, like I mentioned, the racing in Formula One, that it's happening now.
Well, you've mentioned a little bit about AI and using LLM models, but I think that's the next logical iteration of where the data heads. How do you see artificial intelligence shaping or changing data that we have?
Yeah, AI is the next logical step, I would say. But in my opinion, to be able to implement AI models to our data and help us to make decisions, we need to be able to do a really good job on using the machine learning models. So basically, the AI models, they are going to have the models that we are using here as the foundation for making their decisions. It's just that the AI concept, artificial intelligence, that is making decisions for us or thinking for us using those models. So first we need to do, let's say, our homework, which is apply and understand what are the best avenues in terms of analysis using machine learning models, because the reality today for systems that are not applying this holistic approach, most of the time they are not even using basic statistical models like regression models, and that's kind of like the first approach that we should do, and they are not going to be using. So I think it's the next logical step, AI, but first we need to do our homework here and understand what are the models that we need to develop for the swine industry. That's a question that needs to come first. And then implementation of AI on top of that will be easy.
In today's episode, Dr. Edison Magalhães shared how the swine industry is growing from collecting data to putting it to work. We discussed efforts to connect information from across the production system, aggregating that data and helping producers gain a clearer picture of what drives performance from birth to market, and identify opportunities to improve efficiency. We also heard the growing role of artificial intelligence and how emerging technologies may help producers make sense of increasingly complex data sets. Data truly is becoming the most powerful tool on the farm, with the potential to improve everything from day-to-day management to long-term performance. A big thank you to Edison for joining us and sharing his expertise. And thank you to all of you for tuning in to today's conversation. We'll be back next month with another timely conversation on all things swine. Until then, I'm Delaney Howell, and this has been the PigX Podcast.
PigX is a national podcast hosted by the Pig Livability Project partners at Iowa State University, Kansas State University, and Purdue, and supported by the Iowa Pork Industry Center. For more information on the project, head to www.piglivability.org, or to inquire directly with questions regarding the project, email ipic.iastate.edu. PigX, ideas in the swine industry worth sharing.